Today's going to be controversy, so put down your pitchforks, grab some popcorn. This is year two of our top 50 NBA players going into next season. Bakari, of course, you were on the show last week. It was great to have you, but you're back for this very special podcast and edition of the show. But welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I liked the show last week, Top 10 Centers. We had a lot of fun doing that. So everybody's going to love this show this week. A lot to talk about, a lot to get going, and a lot of things that we want to hear you guys' opinions on. So,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. Again,
can't
NFL
wait.
season's right around the corner, but this is a yearly series, and I love to cap it off with our top 50 NBA players. Let's kick it off with some honorable mentions and also my criteria. In short, what have you done for us lately, right? Over the last year and a half or so, what do your stats look like? Have you had any crazy individual moments? How does your play on the court, I guess, relate to winning at a high level? That always helps. And for some of these guys, health did play a factor. Guys like Kawhi Leonard, for example, he's probably farther down the list than he should be, but it's because of his health over the last 2 or so years. But that's really it. So again, the last thing I'll say is view these guys in tiers of five. So, for example, these honorable mentions, they're all in the same tier of player to me, just right outside the top 50. And of course, number 38 in your eyes might be better than number 36, etc., etc. So view these guys in tiers of five. Honorable mentions. We're Cavs fans. If we could have it our way, these guys would both be top five in the league, right behind Donovan Mitchell. But Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, two very solid players. I'd say Jarrett Allen's better after last season. But again, both guys definitely had an argument to be on this list. Chet Holmgren, OG Anunoby, two guys that bring you elite all NBA defense. Chet is the modern big that you want in today's game. Maybe a little bit more size on him, pause, but you want to see him beef up a little bit. Outside of that, he's the ideal center in today's game. OG, of course, all NBA player, got paid like it. Desmond Bane, I think, might be the most underrated player in the league, not just at the two guard position. He is going to have a big bounce back season. Bakari, any thoughts on these five players? Do you think any of them should have made the list?
No, I think this is a good tone setter. I think a good way to show people like these are the type of players that we see as right outside the list. Like they get that honorable mention, like it says right there, but they just for whatever reason just haven't had that chance to make the list. And I think players like Chet, if Desmond Bain has a good season this year, we both think he will. Players like Chet, Desmond Bain, yeah, I would even say like even if like Jarrett Allen has another good season or Darius Garland has another bounce back season, these are players that could be on that top 50, next year. So,
Right. Yes. And
um,
for example, there's a guy like Chet Holmgren here. I think this is a guy that could jump as high as probably top 35 next season, as crazy as that sounds. But that is the honorable mentions. And again, these are guys that are literally right outside the list. Let's get into 46 through 50 here. Of course, I had some difficulties there with my charger. Stick with us. 50 is Bradley Beal. Tertiary role took a step back, but let's not forget, and let's not just say after one down season statistically that this guy's just not good at basketball anymore. He had one down year, adjusting to playing with two elite scorers next to him in a role that he's never really played before. So I cut him some slack in that regard. J Dub, is he better than Chet? I think a little bit. Again, that's an argument for a different day, but elite shot creator, he's only going to get better. Jalen Green, that team looked electric second half of the season under Jalen Green being the leader, which is what he was drafted to be. Of course, now Sengun is in that argument for the Rockets going forward, but Jalen Green looks special second half of the season. Mikal Bridges, I'm higher on him than most people. I understand that, but all NBA defense and still can knock down a three at an extremely high clip, and I expect him to do that a lot here for the Knicks on a nightly basis. Bakari, my only question for Mikal is, can he? Who's going to win here? Is it going to be Mikal's durability or Tom Thibodeau's injury-riddled coaching style?
I'm
DeJounte
gonna go with
Murray.
McCown.
You said what?
I'm gonna go with McCall on that one.
Mikal. Wow. Okay. I'm surprised.
Josh Hart, Josh Hart was able to get through it, so I
It
Mikal
seems
Bridges
like he
should
goes
be
out of
able
his way to get some of those star players hurt. D Rose. But DeJounte Murray at 46, definitely the best player in this tier. I think there's no doubt about it. I think this guy has an argument to be as high as 41 on this list, as crazy as that sounds. But 22 and a half, 5.5, 6.5, 1.5 steals. All NBA defense gives you elite offensive production. New situation there in New Orleans. Interested to see what he can do. But here's your 46 through 50. View these guys in the first tier. Okay, just as I'm getting to that. Any thoughts on these 5 players, Bakari? Of course, you see some players that moved down from last year's list, not
Yeah.
because they've done worse. For some of these guys, it's just because other people have done better.
Yeah, DeJounte, I like the fact that he's here, that we could talk about him in that first list, because DeJounte was somebody who a lot of people probably say he was the best player on the Hawks last year. And that's including when Trae Young was on the court with him at the same time. Obviously we had big expectations going back to last year with that backcourt, and it just didn't work out. And this year, DeJounte going through all those trade rumors, everything like that, I know it was hard for him to keep playing, because all you heard was, oh, he's going to get traded to LA. He's going to get traded to LA. He's going to get traded to, this place or that place. Then the trade deadline happened and he didn't get traded. And Trae Young was hurt. And then next thing you know, DeJounte and the team are winning. Trae Young is hurt. DeJounte and the team is winning. They're playing a lot better. Then Trae Young comes back and they lose in the play-in. So I really think that Hawks team, I don't want to say they made the wrong decision. I understand that you got to keep Trae for the franchise and everything like that. Trae is the one you drafted. He's that hometown hero, or not that hometown hero, but he's that player that you molded. But DeJounte, I think would have been a better off player, because you could have. There's more versatility around DeJounte. So
Yeah, he's not as big of a hole on one side of the court as Trae Young. And Trae Young, some nights, if his shooting ability's not there, we'll talk about Trae Young later. How about that? But again, DeJounte, Mikal, Jalen Green, J-Dub, and Bradley Beal barely get into the list. 45 through 41. It's going to kick off with Zach LaVine. Of course, injury riddled last season. Of course, he was also a bit of a drama queen, even though I come to the defense of Zach LaVine a fair amount. Bit of a drama queen there in Chicago. Now DeMar DeRozan's gone. So now it's back to what it was before DeMar got there. It's Zach LaVine's team. He just needs to be healthy, and I think he can shock a lot of people with his play. Kind of remind us how he's an all-star level player every single season. Jamal Murray moves a lot down this list. Look, it's just outside of the 2 playoff game winners against the Lakers, which if he doesn't hit those game winners, they might not win the series against the Lakers. However, outside of those 2 moments, he really had a bad season, right? It was really a subpar season for Jamal Murray, especially when you look at what he did 2 and 3 years ago. And I am a big Jamal Murray fan. At least I was for a while. But you got to just put the past behind you. This is a guy that even in the Olympic play struggled, right? And those are viewed as lesser talents than what we have in the NBA. But overall, didn't help Jokic much, and they suffered in the playoffs because of it. James Harden, I have 1 spot above him. 2 guys that are definitely interchangeable. James Harden, his stats weren't what we once knew. But again, still, he can manipulate the game, unlike a lot of other players in the league. There's not many players that do it at a higher level. And especially talking about stuff that he does that other players can't do at his level is his playmaking ability. This year, it's going to be asked to go back to more of a scoring role there with Paul George's departure. Excited to see what James Harden can do. The return of the beard there in LA. Brandon Ingram falls down the list yet again, but still a talented scorer. He just ended the year very poorly. When the team needed him to step up, he was nowhere to be found. I understand he came off of injury, but sooner rather than later, a bucket needs to be a bucket. And then Alperen Sengun, an all-star level big, a guy that dropped 40 and 20 on Wemby in the game last year. That was definitely the highlight, but I think last year was a big year for him, a breakout season, and he kind of solidified himself as maybe the Rockets' go-to franchise guy for the next 10 years. But that is 41 through 45, excuse me. A lot of people moving a lot of spots down here from last year's list. Bakari, your thoughts on these 5?
Yeah, first, wow, DeJounte being a top 25 player last year is I mean, not DeJounte, Jamal Murray being
Jamal Murray was the number 26, I believe.
Oh
Oh, no, he
yeah,
moved 20 spots down. He was 23. So yeah.
yeah, that's a little crazy. But like you said, I think DeJounte had an argument to be above. I'd say all the way
That was coming off the
through.
chip, not to cut you off, but that was coming off the chip where he played great in that playoff run. So
Yeah,
recency bias. But go ahead.
yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Like you said, DeJounte Murray from the last tier is somebody I would consider moving up, probably past that Jamal Murray, and right between Brandon Ingram. But the way these five are, I like the way these five are slotted. I honestly, to me, I'd even go as far as saying I know James Harden, statistically didn't have the same season Jamal Murray had. But I think his impact was a little bit bigger for
Right,
that
right.
Clippers team in that tertiary role. He was their primary playmaker, their tertiary scorer. Like you touched on Jamal Murray. I think, like you said, the past is the past with Jamal Murray, and I'm not taking away anything he's done because he was amazing in that finals run that they had. But I think people get caught up in, oh, he tore his ACL and he was doing this and that before the ACL tear, and he had like I said, he had a good finals run. But I think people sometimes get caught up in who players used to be, and sometimes they just can't see what that player is currently bringing to the table. And Jamal Murray is, I think sometimes people get caught up in, he hit those 2 game winners versus the Lakers. Oh, he had a good season. Well, those are 2 game winners versus the Lakers. So, I think that this list is very solid. Like you touched, even Brandon Ingram. He was hurt most of last season, and when they did need him, he just couldn't do anything. But we all know what Brandon Ingram can be. We know that there are a lot of teams that wanted Brandon Ingram when he was on the trade block. So, um, you know,
Yeah.
well, that's just where we are right now. So,
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Ingram wasn't even the third best player on that play-in team after Zion went down, and the playoff team rather. You can make an argument he wasn't even top three, because Jonas was playing great. I think Trey Murphy was their best player, and then of course Herb Jones has an argument to be
Jose
better than
Alvarado
Brandon
was,
Ingram.
was pretty good too.
Yeah, as well. I'm sorry, one more time.
Jose Alvarado was good
Yes,
as well.
Jose. Jose. It's definitely a fan favorite. Let's move over into the top 40. A guy that didn't make the list last year, and because we saw for the last couple of years, doesn't matter if he was in Utah or Minnesota or even playing for the French national team, there's moments where you cannot play this dude because of his inability to guard the perimeter, right? And even though this guy is tied right now for the most defensive players of the years of all time with guys like Ben Wallace and Dikembe Mutombo, there's moments where you can't play this guy in the playoffs. In those biggest moments where you look at a defensive player of the year and you're saying, we should be able to play this dude throughout the entirety of every single game, every single minute, unless he's in foul trouble. You just don't get that sometimes with Rudy Gobert. But still giving you, again, a double-double a night. He's still a 7'1" Frenchman that protects the rim at a high level. Jaren Jackson, I have one spot above him, the defensive player 2 years ago, and last year he took a step up offensively. Now he doesn't crash the boards like a 6'10", 6'11" guy should do, but he protects the rim at a high level. You want to see him be a little bit more efficient as well, but I think he gives you more defensive versatility than Rudy Gobert. Also, of course, the offensive bag is there if you want to say that. Lauri Markkanen, giving you about 23 and a half and 8 a night. Am I overrating him? Maybe. I don't know. But a guy that is just such an underrated player for the Utah Jazz. I think he's in that conversation with Desmond Bane as the most underrated player in the league. But I think Lauri's getting a little bit more respect over the last year and a half or so. But Lauri Markkanen, such an underrated player, does everything they need, and he shoots 50, 40 to 90 damn near for the Utah Jazz. Kristaps Porzingis one spot above him. This is definitely an argument, but for what I touched on, if you just want to talk about impact, Kristaps maybe had a top 15, top 20 impact last season throughout the stretches that he played for the Boston Celtics. We especially saw his impact there for the in that game one of the finals where we talked about it last week. It didn't seem like the Mavericks had a chance once KP stepped on the court, and that was a KP that was coming off an injury. And then Jrue Holiday, a guy that it's a shame he hasn't won a Defensive Player of the Year. He should win it. And you look at his stats and you say, this dude should not be, higher than number 48 on this list. But you got to watch the games. His impact is there. He's always making the right play. He's never taking those ill-advised shots, it seems like. And there's a reason a guy like that of his play style, fits perfectly on a team like Team USA. Players want to play with Jrue Holiday. That doesn't factor into the list, but just something I also like to throw out there. Your thoughts on 36 through 40? A lot of defense here, Bakari.
Yeah. I like the respect to Lowry Marketing and Jaren Jackson Jr. especially. Lowry, like you said, I think he's starting to come around in terms of people giving him his respect, especially when there was that little Warriors drama where he could have been traded. As everybody knows, he signed that extension, so he can't even get traded during this upcoming season because of when he signed it. But Lowry, as a Cavs fan, seeing where he was, where
Yeah.
he was with us that 1 year, and then seeing where he went to after Utah, it's kind of crazy to see that development. I didn't think that he would develop like that, but it is seeing that he is the Jazz's all-star player or
Can you
franchise player.
imagine if he was our 3 instead of Struce?
Yeah, well, exactly. And once upon a time he was, so that's the crazy thing. And then Jaren Jackson Jr., like you said, you showed up his stats. Obviously that efficiency and everything with his numbers. That just kind of happens when you're on a team where you're the best player and there's really just G League talent around you for the
Auntie
whole year.
Old Mama or Old
Yeah,
Alma.
like
I don't see his name.
the Jared Jackson Jr. He played the most out of anybody from I'd say the Memphis team from like a year or two ago. Everybody was hurt. Everybody knows that. Like you mentioned with the boards, I think that just happens naturally because he's always had like a Steven Adams or a bigger center to kind of be there with him, and he's always played the 4, so he never had to do any like really real rebounding. But I think next year would be a step up. Maybe Memphis decides to go like kind of like a 5 wide where they kind of have Jaren Jackson Jr. out in that perimeter and have him crash the boards more. So we'll see. But I like the respect to Lowry and Jaren Jackson Jr. there.
Yeah, no, I'm curious to see how if Jaren just like starts the year at the 5 and they run really small there in Memphis, or if they're going to start Zach Edey from day one and kind of have the same lineup as last year when of course Steven Adams was healthy, but also Brandon Clark plays into that mix as well. We'll have to see what lineup they will run out. Let's get into 34 to 30, 31 to 35, whatever. Karl-Anthony Towns here is in this next tier. The greatest shooting big man of all time. All the stats will back that. And there was moments last year where he took over, especially in that playoff run, and he was untouchable, right? No, I think, again, his production goes, I think it's undervalued because everyone, Anthony Edwards is such a great player, and he's such a great talent that, his greatness gets all this attention, and we kind of don't give, any flowers to anybody else on this Minnesota Timberwolves roster. Cat, I think, deserves a lot of those. Conley, as well as, of course, I will come to his defense as much as I can. But Karl-Anthony Towns, he's been underrated for a long time, I believe, especially in the Anthony Edwards era. But giving you 22 a night on elite efficiency, some nights he'll give you great defense as well. Just underrated. Tyrese Maxey, one spot above him. It's a guard-driven league. Am I overrating him over Cat already? Maybe. But 26 and 6.5 a night, and you really saw it in that playoff run. He is the perfect guy next to Joel Embiid. And now that they brought in Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, I think him and Paul George can take turns of being who's going to be the second leading scorer tonight, right? Is it going to be me or is it going to be you? And I think the only thing I want to see from Maxey going forward is a little bit more defense, but I think his defense is also underrated with how feisty he is on that side of the court. But a young player only entering the prime of his career. Scotty Barnes, first-time All-Star last season, giving you 28 and 6 a night. After Pascal left, we saw a different version of Scotty. Really before that, like that month before Pascal got traded, we knew Scotty could be the guy for this team going forward. Excited to see how much he can continue to grow and develop. Julius Randle, the modern day Zach Randolph, Bakari. Big fan of Zach Randolph, not a big fan of Julius Randle. But Julius Randle, when he played the first half of last season, 24, 9, and 5. This was a guy that was an all-NBA player the 2 years ago. And for good reason, because he is a bully ball kind of a guy, and he's just dominant when he gets hot. Problem is, there's some flaws in his game, like ill-advised shot taking, or sometimes lackluster defense. But Julius Randle, this team played better without him second half of the year. The only thing that's saving him in this argument is the fact that they were like 11-1 with the trio of Brunson, Randle, and OG Anunoby. And then Trae Young tops off this tier here, giving you 25.5 and 11. He's just a one-sided player. Now, he's great on the offensive side when he gets it going, but there's moments even we saw in the play-in last year where he tries to get himself in rhythm so much that sometimes other people are just standing around. And then when he has a stretch where he's not making or playmaking at a high level for 2 to 3 possessions in a row, everyone's now cold, right? Because they're not even touching the basketball. So Trae Young, amazing offensive player, terrible on as great as he is offensively. That's how bad he is defensively. But again, definitely he moves down this list because I want to see him be the leader of this team next year and bring them back to a playoff spot, not a play-in spot. Your thoughts on these 5?
Yeah. I think I'm a little bit higher on Tyrese Maxey than most people, and we've had these discussions off the pod. Kind of just
Yes.
talking about random players. I think Tyrese Maxey to me, I can't really pinpoint what exactly it is why I'm so high on him. Maybe it's because I've seen, like everybody, I've kind of just seen his development over the years. I think I give him a lot of credit too for just kind of keeping that Philly team afloat. And I think this next year will be a coming year for Tyrese Maxey. He's played. I don't think people give him a lot of credit for playing with Joel Embiid and playing, in a few different scenarios with through that Ben Simmons drama with James Harden. Now with Paul George, I think in terms of steadiness, he hasn't had that. He's had Doc Rivers and Nick Nurse. So I think Tyrese Maxey's had a lot to overcome and has done that and has improved every year, as to why I give him so much more credit, I feel like, than a lot of other people. And Karl-Anthony Towns, it's nice to see him get his respect as well. Like you said, I think this is somebody who during the Anthony Edwards era has been disrespected, just like you said. And it's crazy because up until this year, Karl-Anthony Towns is always that main option. He was that first option in Minnesota. It was really this year where the script really flipped. And obviously that worked out well for Minnesota. You saw them have their best year in franchise history going to that conference finals. But Cat was a huge part of that. And I don't want people to look at the conference finals, those 3 bad games he had in the conference finals, to kind of, determine who he is as a player and, he needs to be traded or he didn't have a good season. No, Cat was amazing last year. He had that 60-something point game versus Charlotte that they ended up losing, trying to force feed him the ball. And like you mentioned, his defense and during the playoffs at times was elite. It was better than Rudy Gobert sometimes.
Against Jokic.
Yeah, exactly. And he was just able to do a few more things on that court that I think we don't give Cat enough credit for. And unfortunately, it just seems like he might be one of those players where you don't recognize how good he is or how good his talent is until he's gone. So, Karl-Anthony Towns, he's definitely earned his flowers, and I think it's time that he starts getting those flowers even more.
Yeah, again, I forgot to mention it. The biggest thing was kind of how he played against Jokic when Gobert was having his son. And he really stepped up, and everyone was like, "Oh, Jokic is going for 40 and 20," and Cat really shut Jokic down, something that nobody else could really do. And that team, of course, they blew the Nuggets out in that game 1, I believe, game 1 or game 2.
Both
Next tier here, we have 26 through 30. So entering the top 30 players in the NBA, and we're gonna kick it off with Pascal Siakam. 21 and a half a night, 7 assists or 7 rebounds, of course. This was the guy that from the midseason mark really until the second round of the playoffs when Tyrese Halliburton started to find himself again after that big slump he went through. He was their go-to guy. He was their scorer, giving them 25 to 30 a night. Second half of the season, his stats were tremendously better than what they were first half of the year with Toronto. But now second round of the playoffs, that's when Miles Turner, that's when Tyrese Halliburton really started to find their offensive game. And for some odd reason, they went away from what worked for so much of the season, and Pascal was really a tertiary guy at times in this Indiana offense. But I will say, regardless of how it unfolded, they got to the Eastern Conference Finals. They overachieved even for my expectations going into last season for the Pacers. Of course, I was high on them, unlike a lot of people. But Pascal, of course, I think deserves his flowers, especially for being traded mid-season and then still flourishing in that role. DeMar DeRozan, and I might as well pair these guys together at 34, and De'Aaron Fox at 33. Swipe, of course, 26 and a half. Just all-star numbers, right? All NBA numbers, arguably, if this team can win more than 50 or so games a year. And then, of course, DeMar DeRozan, new scenery there in Sacramento. I'm interested. We talked about it last week with Sabonis. Who's going to sacrifice? Who's going to sacrifice their offensive numbers? Because DeMar DeRozan's not going to do that, right? He's going to be sitting in that mid-range. So is it going to be Sabonis stepping out a little bit more, or is it going to be De'Aaron Fox on that perimeter a little bit more next to a guy like Keegan Murray? Still, I will say it every time. Keegan Murray has the best fan chant in the league. Victor Wembanyama, the second highest debuter on this list, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Of course, I forgot his stocks here for whatever reason, but it's at 4.8. I remember that. Elite numbers from Victor Wembanyama. He was, I say it on this podcast a lot. It's one thing to have expectations. It's another thing to live up to them. And even under a minute restriction, Wemby blew those expectations out the water. He was second in Defensive Player of the Year. You can argue he should have won it, but elite numbers and to average 4 blocks in your rookie season, I don't think we're ever going to see that again. Bam Adebayo at number 31 tops off this list. Elite production, and honestly, this morning I was thinking about moving this guy up the list. I think I'm underrating him, but regardless, your thoughts on these 5?
Yeah, like you said, Pascal is definitely a player that deserves a little bit of attention because of what he was able to do, kind of just leaving Toronto and coming into Indiana, where the franchise player was going on, pretty much. If after the in-season tournament, Tyrese Halliburton was kind of not there for the rest of the season, going into the playoffs. So Pascal kind of came and saved the Pacers season. So, shout out Pascal, DeMar and De'Aaron Fox, like you mentioned, that situation in Sacramento, who's going to sacrifice. We'll have to see. This will really test Mike Brown's coaching. We'll really see what type of coach Mike Brown is. And Wemby, it's funny because, I think with Wemby, we both try and kind of like keep the hype down a little bit. Like, Wemby's great, but, he's just one of those players. You watch him, you see the effect he has. And it's just impossible to ignore. And I think everything Wemby related is warranted. And even like it's funny because I remember talking with everybody knows Amir, another co-host on the show. We were talking one day and we were just saying like it's crazy from the first moment Wemby stepped on the NBA floor to how he ended the season. I don't think I've seen anybody progress that much ever.
No,
in one season. It was just that he looked like a completely different player in March than he did in like last November. And it was just that confidence and everything that he was building up. And I know this year he's going to come back and be, as crazy as he was this year, next year he's probably going to be even better. So, I think this list is turning out great so far. And who's 26? Like, oh, Bam. Yes.
Bam.
Like you said, I was somebody who personally overrated or underrated Bam. I'm sorry. Bam to me was always kind of one of those guys. He just not a product of Heat culture, but he was a solid guy in the Heat. All-star type of player. I really get it with Bam now, and it not just Team USA showed me, but I think seeing him work on his jumper and providing more to the game, I think that's going to be huge for the Heat. Like you mentioned, Bam is one of those players who he could be placed higher on the list now. I think next year he'll be even higher again. So.
It's crazy, but again, we saw it. He's going to be playing the 4 this year in Miami. We got a glimpse of it for Team USA, but I'm excited to see his offensive development this year. I think if he plays like he did last year, next year, he might have an argument to be the best player in the Heat. As high as I have Jimmy on this list, of course, Bam Adebayo, I think he's just underrated. And to reiterate, I think he has an argument next season to be the best on the team. Moving in to the top 25. This is not an exciting pick. This is not something that I'm like, oh yeah, Damian Lillard top 25. It's not like I was for the last 5 to 6 years. And that's because, you look at his counting stats, 24.5 and 7 in a new situation. When you take into account that this team gave up a lot of depth really to bring in Damian Lillard, it's like he was just thrown into a situation expecting to be what he always was. And I think he was, you look at his counting stats, he was elite last season. But this team just underperformed, and I think because the fact that this team had so much drama outside of just the court, I think we kind of, I guess, undervalued what this team actually did, or what Damian Lillard and Giannis did last season. But regardless, I think this is a big year for Milwaukee. I think anything less than the Eastern Conference Finals is a failure for this duo. And I expect Damian Lillard to come out. He's been talking his stuff all off season. I wanted to see that replicated on the court like he always has. 24, your second favorite player of all time. Paul George, I'm sorry to say your favorite player and my favorite player are no longer in these conversations. But Paul George, still an elite 2A player. I think he was heavily underrated last season, especially when Kawhi was out for stretches late in the year. But just, I think he goes underrated because, again, the team success is not there with Milwaukee. So we underrated Damian Lillard's season. And the Clippers, they were expected to win the title last year, like they always have been. And since the team success wasn't there, I think we underrate a lot of players on the roster, like Harden, like PG, like Kawhi, as far as their individual efforts. Paolo Banchero, the highest debut on this list this season. He was number 51 last season. And that was because I was like, am I overrating him? Like, I'm a big Paolo fan. He plays a lot like Carmelo, my favorite of all time. He was 51 because I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to throw him on the list because of recency bias or my personal opinion. But he jumps all the way up into the top 23. A guy that led the second youngest team in basketball last season to the 5 seed. And if, I mean, if he had a better, I guess, start to the series, this is a guy that would have won the series for the Orlando Magic against the Cavaliers, and they would have put up a better fight against the Celtics. I'm almost positive that would have happened. I didn't know, of course, Jared Allen would have sat at home the whole entire second round. The Magic, they were feisty, and they were, especially in games 5, 6, and 7, Paolo showed a different offensive side of his game, knocking down the three at a high clip. And just on the season, I think what he did was very underrated and very impressive. First-time All-Star as well. Kyrie Irving, another personal favorite of mine. He won us a championship here in Cleveland. But 25 and a half, 5 and 5. I think we saw a different player last season. I think in the regular season, we saw the same Kyrie that we always knew, the elite offensive force that he always is. And again, Robin, that's where he's always been his best at, is in that Robin role. But in that postseason, something changed for Kyrie. I don't know if he watched some Kobe highlights. I don't know if he saw a Kobe motivational video. This is a guy that just all of a sudden bought into the defensive side of the ball. And he was pretty dang good at the defensive side of the ball throughout the entire postseason. And he took a step back scoring wise to also play make at a better level than I think we've ever seen him play make at. So because of the fact he's rounded out his game a little bit, I still have him as a top 22 player. He could even be higher on this list. And one of my favorite players in the league, Domantas Sabonis, we talked about him last week. I'm not going to spend too much time, but I think just such a dominant force, right? He's a baby Jokic, some would say. I want to see him be a little bit more efficient with his jumper, like he was 2 to 3 years ago, and really in OKC early in his career. I just want to see him get back to being a little bit more efficient with that. But outside of that, there's not too many guys that are going to get you 20 and 15 on a nightly basis with almost basically a 20-point triple-double. Your thoughts on these 5, Bakari? Interesting 5.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I guess I personally would maybe change is probably Bam being in Dame's spot. I think Bam is somebody who will be a top 25 player. And like you said, Dame, he's talked. I think Dame is a product of, he always talks his stuff, and he doesn't really have the success to go with. He has, I guess, the individual stats, if you want to count that. Dame is somebody who is a top 75 player in NBA history, and a lot of people don't really agree with that. Just him being that high over certain players.
Not over Dwight Howard.
Yeah. He comes into this situation, like you mentioned, it's a new situation. But I think there were just a lot of times where it's like Dame just kind of, I don't know. It's like his shooting percentages weren't good. It's like sometimes you watch the games and he's just, he's out there chucking. It's like he's not even really trying to find his spots. But I mean, I guess the spot is 35 feet out. So I get that. Dame has the ability to improve his situation. So, but I guess personally, I just put Bam there, seeing what Bam did for the Heat, especially when Jimmy went out in the playoffs and everything. PG, I like where PG is at, like you mentioned, just a product of, the team's not doing as well as advertised, and, certain people just having to take the blame for it. And like in PG situation, team's not built for PG. Kawhi's always out. You see what happens. They have to play Dallas without Kawhi. So, I think that's just certain things have to happen. I've been a huge Paolo fan as well. That he's almost like a baby Bron, not a baby Bron, but almost like it. His stats, you look at it, sometimes he does things where you're like, oh man, that's kind of like Bron-like. But I think, like you said, it's more like mellow-ish from the mid-range, especially.
It's a combination, definitely.
Yeah, and I think Kyrie is a bonus or where they are, where they should be, especially Kyrie, where that playoff run is, like you mentioned, why he's here. That defense and that secondary shot creating. He kind of had a rough finals, but I think most people would against the defense of Boston. So
Moving over or into the top 20, and we're going to start with a dude that once upon a time I had a Instagram account banned for a week because of a comment on a certain channel. Zion Williamson at 24 years old, Bakari. You don't have to explain that story unless you want to. But again, last year, I think I'll say this. What we saw second half of the year from Zion is the reason why he's this high on the list. We saw that this dude finally just said, I'm not messing around anymore. I'm just putting my shoulder down and I'm going to do the same exact move every single time. Put my body into you, hit you like 2 to 3 times, and either dunk or make a contested layup. Zion was just a dominant force. The only downside to his game last year was the fact that he was the most blocked player, but he's been the last 2 or 3 years. That's just what's going to happen when you're a 6'6" big man. But Zion, I think, for the simple fact that he's slimmed down this offseason, can you imagine this dude if he's a little bit more agile and quicker? We might get some crazy posters and highlights this year, but I think for the simple fact that he's just a dominant force, he's at number 20. And number 19, Tyrese Halliburton. Look, you won't find many, harder truthers behind Tyrese Halliburton. Bigger fans. I don't know why I didn't just go that route. Than me, as far as Tyrese Halliburton. Going into last year, I predicted he was going to be an all-star, and I predicted this team was going to be a top 5 or top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. That came true. I didn't think they were going to the Eastern Conference Finals, though. They had a fortunate path, right? Knows Giannis along the way. But Tyrese led a team that shocked the world last season. We saw in moments in that playoff run where he just took over and he couldn't miss. And he was just, again, a very great point guard in the NBA last season. And number 18, Kawhi Leonard. He did have a relatively healthy season last year. Played 65 plus games, or close to it. But this is a guy that he hasn't been healthy when it matters most. And I think that's one thing when, 10 years down the line where we're like, what's a big what if? And one of us brings up the Clippers, this PG and Kawhi Clippers team. Look, they were close in the bubble. They were right there in the Western Conference Finals, they were up 3-1 against the Nuggets in the semifinals, excuse me. They were right there. They looked like they were going to run through the entire NBA, but health got in the way. And ever since that bubble run, it's just year after year, it's either Kawhi or PG or the supporting cast. Regardless, as far as the last year or so of basketball, Kawhi is still elite when he plays, but when he's not, it seems to be always in those big moments. Ja Morant at 17, I had him at 16, but for the simple fact that he didn't play 96% of last season, I moved him down just one spot. But I think, when healthy, you might back me on the statement, he has an argument to be a top 10 player in the league. Not only that, he has an argument to be the best point guard in the league after next season if he comes back and plays like we think he can play. Jaylen Brown, for simply the fact that he did everything for the Celtics, he got all the shine from the Celtics in that postseason run, giving you 25 and 5.5 a night, all NBA player just in general, but also an all NBA talent on the defensive side of the ball. He was the Larry Bird, of course, conference finals MVP, also the finals MVP for a franchise that got their first ring in over a decade. Your thoughts higher on this 5? Who's too high, too low? Let me know.
No, I think Zion. I think the reason he's there is because we both. I think everybody who watched that play-in game where he was healthy up until he got hurt, the Lakers were going to lose that game.
They were.
Zion absolutely took over, and I think that was just a glimpse of how dominant Zion can be. My only worry is that this year, because he slimmed down, which is obviously beneficial for his health and long-term longevity. He's going to have to play more wing ball than I don't think he'll be able to play that kind of like 6'5", 6'6" big man anymore. I think he'll have to play more wing ball. So that'll mean he'll have to get a better handle and kind of more shot creating skills from the perimeter. So we'll have to see how that works out for him this year. But the last time we saw him on the court, he was absolutely dominant. Like you mentioned, Hallie, just based off of the way the team played last year and where they ended up, he has to be here. Obviously, he had a phenomenal start to the season up until that mid-season or that end-season tournament. And then after that, he kind of vanished, whether it was a leg injury or whatever you want to call it. Then he
Right.
came back alive for for the last series versus the Celtics. Even then, he had a few blunders. And then going into the season or going into the summer, he got hurt again with Team USA. Apparently, that's the story they're telling us. Hallie is one of those players. He's been hurt every single year of his career. I think minus the first year when he was with Sacramento, he's been hurt for long stretches of time. So I think Hallie, we just got to see more of him on the court. And the way he starts the season, if we could see that longer into the season, that would help him get higher onto these lists. Like you said, Ja's probably going to end up in a top 10 next year. Jaylen Brown might also move up again next year as well. So I like the way that, there's a lot of talent. We have Jaylen Brown, Ja, Tyrese, Kawhi, and Zion from 20 to 16. So
Yeah. I know you're higher on Jaylen Brown than a lot of people, right? And that's saying a lot because he's already at 16 on my list. I'll ask you one thing about Tyrese. Do you think this is his ceiling? And I'll ask you one more thing. I'll ask you one more. For Tyrese, do you think this is his ceiling on this list? And for Kawhi Leonard, do you think this is the highest he's going to be ever again?
yes, for Kawhi. Tyrese, I'm leaning more towards yes. Like and this is not a bad ceiling. A bad ceiling is not 20 and 11.
Right.
I think there are just always going to be guards that are better than him in the league. Just players in general. Now with that being said, I feel like he's 19 right now. I feel like he might hit maybe 15 once or twice. This isn't a bad ceiling. That's not
Right.
anything
Right.
against
I mean,
him.
this is still elite player.
Yeah, it's just, given what we've seen so far in the trend of his career is play really good the first couple of months of the season, build your stats up, get hurt, kind of fall off through the season. And it's just so worked out that they got Pascal this year too. That's another thing I'll add. Every year he's done this where he started off really crazy. They've fallen all the way out of playoff contention. This year they just got Pascal to come in and be that another star. So I don't think
If
it's
Pascal's not there, I don't know if this team is able to get past the play-in and to make that magical run that they did, and that kind of propelled him all the way up into the top 20. But you can continue. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Pascal is the reason Tyrese is here. Team success and everything. So not a bad ceiling. I think this is I would lean more towards yes with that question. And maybe I'm a little bit lower than Tyrese than some people. You like you said, you're a big time Tyrese fan. I don't know if that's just me, but when I look at Tyrese, I don't say, oh yeah, he's going to be even better next year. I think, oh yeah, he might get like 22 and 11 next year if he's healthy, but he's going to be healthy.
Yeah, you also gotta factor in Ben Matherin's coming back. That was a guy that was a 20-point scorer for them in the first half of the season. So the numbers might not be there for Tyrese, but it's an impact thing. Moving into the top 15, and I made a last minute change here. So we'll look at it here in a moment. But in this tier, we have Devin Booker. Of course, I'm a big D Book fan apparently these last couple of years. Jimmy Butler is in this tier. Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, our hometown guy. Of course, we believe he's number 1 in the league. And Anthony Davis. That is 11 through 15. I made a last minute change. I put D Book over Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler moves down 1 spot to 15. Your thoughts on these 5?
Jimmy Butler is again a player that you'd like Kawhi. I think this is highest he'll be. Jimmy is more of an impact guy than a numbers guy. I know that. A lot of people know that. I just, we were having this debate the other day. In terms of players, there are players under Jimmy you're going to take over him. Like in terms of just who do I want more, him or Jimmy? And because of team success and the 2 finals run Jimmy's has had, you gotta give him his respect. But he's definitely more of an impact guy. I will say this year though was probably his best, impact and statistical season. Every other year, I feel like he's under 20 points or right at 20 points or whatever the case is, and he doesn't really play a lot of games, but that's just Jimmy in a regular season in general. So yeah, I like Jimmy at 15. I think makes a lot of sense. I gotta see that list again.
Oh yeah, here we go. Sorry.
Yeah, D Book was everything. Some people might argue D Book over D Mitch. But I think I personally and just as biased Cavs fans, we know what Donovan Mitchell had to carry and what he had to do this past season just to get us to where we were. And Donovan Mitchell, I think his leadership has also taken a step up too. Devin Booker is kind of playing in a unique situation where he's playing with, a top 5 scorer of all time in Kevin Durant. He's playing with Bradley Beal, so they have a unique situation over there. I think next year Devin Booker can be a 11 or 12, or in the top 10. Jalen Brunson, his development is kind of crazy too, because I don't think
15
anybody.
spots.
Yeah, last year he was really good, but for him to be able to take another step up and kind of be like insane, and it always makes me mad because he'll always do that little floater into the defender and kind of flop his hair and always get the foul call. I'm like, man, but that's just what he does. So you got to give him his credit. And Anthony Davis, I think he had his best season as a Laker out aside from the finals run that they had.
Yeah.
I
think for Anthony Davis, I think he's in a tier of his own here. I think if we had to split these into 2 tiers, I think he is at 11, and then there's a tier break, and then you have these next 4 guys. But I mean, excuse me. Of course, you see Anthony Edwards is at number 10. We'll talk about that in a moment. Jimmy Butler, of course, definitely. Again, I think they just need to start taking that regular season serious. Now, if they pulled off a Damian Lillard trade last year, or if they pulled off one of these 150 trades that they seem to be in the mix for, then Jimmy Butler can take these regular seasons off. But it's like he does it on purpose to put himself in that situation. I like his mindset where he's like, we can beat anybody who's in front of us. It doesn't matter. And to be fair, when Jimmy's on the court, it does feel like the Heat always have that chance because we know what talent he is. But then for Devin Booker and D-Mitch, we have that conversation a lot. What do you want? Do you want the leader, or do you want the better basketball player, the better basketball talent? The better basketball talent is Devin Booker, and I think it will be for the next 10 years. But Donovan Mitchell gives you a little bit more of a complete package. And for a list like this where, we're focusing on the complete package, Donovan Mitchell, of course, I have just 2 spots higher. But for example, I had D-Book at number 10 last season, and that was over Jimmy Butler. I'm that high on Devin Booker. Moving into the top 10, we've talked about this extensively off the pod, so you already know who's in these tiers. But Anthony Edwards at number 10, superstar player, a guy that I think has the potential to be the league MVP in the next 3 years with this core around him, especially because they can win 60-plus games on any given year, and Ant's going to be the driving force for that, or at least the main driving force. And he's just a likable guy. So the narrative is there. Of course, the talent and the numbers are going to be there. Anthony Edwards could be a league MVP in the next 3 seasons. The same can be said about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Led the youngest team in basketball last season to the 1 seed, the youngest 1 seed in NBA history. And sure, does his play style frustrate a lot of us at home? Yes, unless you're a Thunder fan. But Shai is a special talent. He led, for what he did last year to lead this team to the second round of the playoffs was, I want to give him his flowers. He was a top 3 in MVP voting. And, of course, he dominated in stretches for even Team Canada. So Shai at number 9. LeBron James at number 8. Should I have him higher? Maybe, right? But as a Cavs fan and as a LeBron LeBron fan, I'm okay with if I'm undervaluing LeBron James. But at 25, this is a guy that I saw a stat, Bakari, where Frank Gore, right, of course, Hall of Fame level running back, entered the NBA or entered the NFL in 2005. LeBron was averaging 27, 7, and 7, basically. His son, Frank Gore's son, is now entering the NFL, and LeBron is still 20 years later averaging just about the same stats. His longevity is unmatched, and I think that's his biggest argument in the GOAT debate. So again, I want to get your quick argument there. Not argument, but just your quick answer. Is LeBron the GOAT in your eyes?
I think.
Or is it someone funky like Bill Russell?
No, I actually Wilt's my GOAT.
Oh, okay. All right. Counting stats for everything. At number 7, we have Kevin Durant, the Durantula. Of course, the guy that has some of the best nicknames in NBA history. And the Slim Reaper. It might be his best one. But even at 35 years old, he's still giving you elite offensive production. Now, keep in mind, this is a down season for Kevin Durant. His numbers here. And when you really look at it, it's because this system was just janky. As a Cavs fan, I can understand if we go through stretches where Evan Mobley might not touch the ball, or if we go through stretches where Max Strus as a shooter might not touch the ball. But I can't imagine for the Cavaliers to go through a 3-possession stretch where Donovan Mitchell is sitting in the corner, might I add, and he's just not touching the basketball. He's not getting involved in the play. That's what was happening to Kevin Durant last season. He just really became a corner sitter. Now, I understand they have talented scorers like Beal and Booker and Durant. Now, I understand that, but there were stretches where this guy was barely touching the ball in a quarter. And that just shouldn't happen for maybe the most talented scorer of all time, but still an elite player. Jayson Tatum, of course, for Kevin Durant as well, maybe the best player on Team USA this past summer. Jayson Tatum, yes, I have him at number 6. A guy that was at number 6 last year, and I'm in this middle ground with Jayson Tatum. He was the only American to be All-NBA first team last season, and I bring that up because he got All-NBA first team over Durant, over LeBron, right, over some of these other talented Americans. But Jayson Tatum was the leader on one of the best teams statistically that we've ever seen in the Boston Celtics last year. Now, I think as a leader, this guy recognized sometimes I don't need to be the guy that scores 25 to 30 a night. And there's pros and cons to this argument. On one end, you can say he did exactly what his team needed to do to win basketball games at a high level on a nightly basis. On the other side, you can say this team didn't really need him to win at a high level because of how much talent they have. But I think Jayson Tatum, I hate to say it, I don't feel confident about it, but I would have him over Durant and LeBron because he can take over games when need be. But your thoughts on these 5?
Yeah, I think this is a good list. Obviously Ant and Shai get their recognition. I think Ant's recognition has been loud because of just kind of like how he not came onto the scene, because I think everybody knew Anthony Edwards. I think it's just how well, or that next step he took in his play, and not only that, the elevation he had in that playoffs. I think that really showed who he was. Shai as well. Shai, I mean, in a lot of people's eyes, he should have been MVP. You might get a lot of slack for having Shai at 9 instead of 4.
Which is what 2K has him at number 4.
Yeah. Me personally, like you said, Shai's play style.
He's like the guard version of Embiid. To cut you off, but.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it feels like. He gets his 30 points. He doesn't get 39 or 40. He gets 30. And he's going to get 6 assists. He's going to get 6 rebounds, and he's going to get 14 free throw attempts. That's just how he plays. Everybody out there, you're not going to believe me because I'm talking about Shai, and I'm not giving him the best light, but I've been a Shai fan since he was on the Clippers. Yeah,
not to cut you off, Bakari put me on the Shai. Okay, yeah. I wasn't a big fan. I didn't really see the greatness. Bakari put me on all the way in LA. So continue.
Yeah, and that's just how long I've known Shai. I've liked Shai for a long time. It's just I recognize that not a lot of people like his play style or what he does on the court, but we have to give him that respect. Like you mentioned with Bron and KD. Bron is 40. He's an old man. He's an old man. He has gray in his beard. Everybody who watched the Olympics, Bron didn't have a speck of black hair anywhere. It was all gray. He's a granddad out there. And he was still doing what he was doing. Obviously, he won the Olympic MVP, the Olympic basketball MVP. And Kevin Durant, like you mentioned, watching him in Team USA and then watching him in the regular season, it's clear Frank Vogel has no idea how to coach a team like this. He had no idea how to coach a team. Right. Now they have Mike Budenholzer,
which won't be any better, by the way. But continue.
Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, down season for Kevin Durant, he's still probably at his best defensive season too. So I think people need to give that another thought. And Jayson Tatum, like you mentioned, had the playoffs gone differently, where he got the recognition instead of Jaylen Brown, I think that's where people would have Jayson Tatum in a different light. Like, oh yeah, he's guaranteed top 5 player. I think it's because every big award that there was in the playoffs, Jaylen Brown got. And Jayson Tatum had what was that? The finals went 5 games, so Jayson Tatum had a good game 5. Outside of that, it was Kristaps, Jaylen Brown, and Drew. And it's just the team is stacked. That's just what's going to happen. I don't think anybody's doubting Jayson Tatum's in talent or anything. It's just Team USA also didn't help him out. Right. He didn't make a single jump shot. He didn't replay. He got 2 DNPs, and this is supposedly a top 5, top 6 player in the world. So Jason Tatum, everybody knows his talent. It's just kind of, unfortunate kind of seeing the way that some of these things have kind of come around and kind of made him not look like the best player that he is. So
The last thing I want to say about LeBron James, if this is your last year on the top 50, or I guess next year would be, we're going to appreciate the greatness while it's still here. Same can be said about Kevin Durant, even though he doesn't project to be retiring anytime soon. In the top 5, these are the top 5 players to me heading into next NBA season. They are the complete packages. Steph Curry, of course. No, this is not because he hit that one-legged fadeaway, running out of bounds shot over two Frenchmen. That's not why he's here. At 36 years old, the only unanimous MVP in NBA history, the greatest shooter of all time, still shooting about 45, 40, and 90, right? So almost 50, 40, 90, like his MVP years. But 26 and a half a night for a guy that's on a team that was so poorly constructed the last couple of years, and they weren't healthy on top of that. I think that this is a guy that is the only reason why this team is not a bottom feeder the last couple of seasons. And I think Steph Curry still is an elite player. I think there's no player in NBA history that's ever carried more gravity on an NBA court. And I understand that I'm talking about his career here more so than the last year and a half, but maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm just having trouble letting go of the past. But Steph Curry, to me, when I watch him, every shot he puts up, I think is going in. Doesn't matter if it's a, beyond half court shot. I'm glued to the TV and I'm like, this is going in, right? But Steph Curry is such an elite player. I think this team is a more well-rounded this year. If Kuminga could take a step up, right? I think this is a team that can be a top 6 seed.
he will.
To Kuminga, right? He's just not going to be better than Mikal Bridges. But different conversation here, not for the top 5.
We'll see. We'll see.
But if Kuminga could take that step up to be that secondary guy, right, the new Klay Thompson, in a different way, this is a team that could be a top 6 seed in the West next year, and that's because of Stephen Curry. Joel Embiid at number 4. Man, it's not that I'm not a Joel Embiid fan, but this is a guy that is so dominant that I have to acknowledge his greatness. He's giving you 35 and 11 a night. If you are a first-time basketball viewer and you look at these statistics, you're saying, why is he not number 1, right? But Joel Embiid was the runaway MVP first half of last season. If they didn't add this new rule, right, where you have to meet a certain games requirement of 65, Joel Embiid was going to be a 2-time MVP by the season's end. But such an amazing player. He just needs to be healthy and dominant in the postseason, which he was in the first round of last year. And he was doing that on one leg, right? Putting up 50 and 20 on certain nights against the New York Knicks on one leg, I want to reiterate. But such a talented player in Joel Embiid. Luka Doncic. I will say this. You came onto a podcast in the first month of the season, and I came on that podcast and I said, the Dallas Mavericks are contenders because they have Luka Doncic. They are going to go far in the playoffs because they have Luka Doncic. They just needed a center. They got a center. They went to the finals. I have been a big Luka Doncic fan since he entered the NBA. And I'm going to continue to be. I think this dude is, again, on the trajectory to be one of the all-time greats. We need to see him finally get an MVP award, right, before it's too late, and he ends up in that Kobe conversation as players that should have had more MVPs. I want to see him start getting some of these individual accolades, right, and win a ring or two. But last year, I think he was such a dominant player, and if he wasn't banged up in the postseason as much as he was, I think maybe they could have made the finals a little bit more interesting. Regardless, he's at number 3. And number 2, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Let's not quickly forget how dominant this dude is. Giving you 30 and a half and 11 and a half a night with elite defense. Now, this is a guy that in Olympic play, his team didn't succeed, but we saw his jumper looks fluid. It looks almost as fluid as it did like in his rookie season, where he's got a nice, form to him, and he gets a nice touch on it. I'm excited to see if that can transition into the season, but I think there's no doubt there's nobody more dominant in the NBA today than Giannis Antetokounmpo. He just needs to be healthy, right? And he's just one of those players that if he's healthy, his team's always got a shot. Speaking about always having a shot, Nikola Jokic and this Denver Nuggets team. This team has only gotten worse in this past offseason. And if this team wants any chance to contend for a title next year, it's because this dude's going to take another step in his game, which I can foresee happening. There's not many players walking around with those stats, and especially there's not a lot of players walking around with those stats that you don't hear about it. Jokic does not care. This is his part-time job. He loves his horses, and I think for the second year in a row, he's my number one player in the NBA going into the following season. Bakari, your thoughts on the top 5 players? Anything you would change?
No, I wouldn't change anything out of this top 5. I think Joel Embiid, we were both like, oh yeah, like he's the runaway MVP beginning of or first half of last year. We were like, yeah, if he comes back for the playoffs, they have the Philly had a chance. Then Joel did, a lot of the things he did in the playoffs were dirty. Especially and I think that painted him in a completely different picture. I think the few fans that Joel had out there, anyway, because not a lot of people like his game. He flops too much. I think he falls on the ground too much. I think he flops too much. As dominant as his numbers are, it is almost like, it's not like that watching him. Like watching him, it's like a different experience than looking at his stats. You just kind of end up watching him, and it's like, oh, well, he has 37, 13, 6, and 3 blocks. Like, I don't know where that came from because he's been on free throw line 7 straight times. So it's just that just kind of happens with Joel Embiid. And then he obviously struggled in Team USA play. So I think I think Joel Embiid is right where he is. He's just a polarizing type of player, and I think outside of that, everybody else is right where they should be. Luka, we have a group chat outside of the pod, and I put it in there the other day. I'm like, yeah, I mean, if Luka came into every season at least somewhat in shape, he might be able to get a couple MVPs. But he treats that season just like how people say Shaq used to treat the season. He treats the season for conditioning, and he doesn't really get into shape until like April, May, right when the playoffs start. But the downside to that is he might get banged up around there. We saw it this past year. He got banged up, right around the end of the season, and like every game he's like limping really bad. He has a really bad limp. If Luka could come into the season and kind of treat his offseason, better, I think we could see Luka getting that MVP, another MVP, or have a chance to actually win a ring. Like I don't know about you, but I don't think the Mavs will be back, just because of the way certain teams look now. But Luka, you kind of always have a chance. And obviously Jokic and Giannis are there. Only question I have for you is Steph the greatest point guard of all time?
Do you want my biased answer, or you want my basketball answer?
Either one.
My biased answer says that I've never seen a player with more gravity. I've never seen a player more dominant. And because of the fact that he took 4 championships away from the city of Cleveland, or 3 of them, I think he is. As far as watching him with my own 2 eyes. Now, when you look at their basketball careers, Magic Johnson, the dude's a winner, right? I mean, there's no person on this planet ever to, in their rookie season, not only play point guard, but play center for their team, win at a high level, be the rookie of the year and the finals MVP. There's nobody that's ever done that. MJ, Bron, Wilt, Bill, Russell, right? So Magic has, I think, a better resume. But I think as far as a player, due to evolution and all that good stuff, Steph Curry, I think, is the most talented point guard of all time. If that's the answer that you want out of me. If I had to rank them all time, I'm putting Steph over Magic. Should I do that? Probably not. I know you're on the other side of the fence. But Steph Curry to me.
I was just asking because in my defense, the only reason I think it's kind of like an argument is because I don't view really Steph as a point guard, but he's not really a 2 guard. He's a combo guard. He doesn't run that offense. It's Draymond. Steph is a lot of off ball, off screen action. That's a conversation for a different time. But you are right. I have never seen a player absolutely kill your hopes just like Steph has. He hits 3 shots in a row, you're out of the game.
Yes,
Nothing is worse than watching the team you're rooting for go against the Warriors. Steph comes down, hit his 3rd 3 in a row, and then the camera pans out. The announcers aren't even saying anything because it's too loud in Golden State. He's running down, he's doing a night, or he's doing the shimmy that he used to. The shimmy was the most disrespectful.
Yes.
the night, the people now like, oh, night. No, the shimmy was the worst. The shimmy was the worst. Don't let anybody fool you. The shimmy was the worst. But you are right. I don't think Steph, he ripped your heart out in a different way. Kevin Durant did too, but that's Steph with the threes. It was just
For Steph to being able to do it on his own is kind of also what does it. Steph didn't come into the league with a great center next to him. Steph came into the league with Monte Ellis and David Lee. But again, that's what I want to keep reiterating. For the fact that Magic was great from the start of his career to the end of his career, that could be your sole argument. Steph Curry took 4 to 5 years to really find his way. Magic, of course, was dominant from before the NBA. The only thing I want to ask you about this top 5, I want to throw it out there as well. Jokic is the new LeBron. When he goes to the bench, that's when the other teams really catch up. Out of these top 5 players, who do you want to see the biggest season from next year? Whether if that's leading their team to a championship, whether if that's just individually getting certain accolades. Out of these top 5 players, who do you want to see have the biggest season next year?
That's tough because I don't think I want any of these guys on the ring. No, I'm playing. It's tough.
Well, obviously, it's Spider Force. We want to see him win MVP, go on to the finals, win finals MVP, sweep everybody along the way.
I like if I had to pick anybody out of the top 10, it'd probably be Ant. It would be Ant or KD. But I think out of this top 5, I wouldn't be mad if Steph got another ring on the way out. If he got another one that cements him as number 1 in that conversation.
I think it's top 5 if he gets another one.
Yeah. If he gets another one, I think he already has that gold medal does a lot for him too. I think obviously. If he gets another one, that legacy, and just being able to watch something like LeBron, you take watching LeBron for granted, but you try not to every day. Watching another player like Steph, just like kind of his whole career and kind of like really take off when like it's just a different feeling for us because that's right around the time when we started watching basketball. Like you said, one of the first ever Steph games you watched is when he dropped 50 in Madison Square Garden.
That was actually my first ever Steph Curry game.
Yeah, and then just kind of seeing it from there. I was a Warriors fan back before they played the Cavs. I was a Steph fan. I'm like, oh yeah, I had his shoe, everything. Then obviously they played the Cavs, and anything Steph related, get it out of my sight. But I wouldn't be mad if he got another one just because of the greatness. And he's playing in an era where it's kind of not easy to kind of like forget about him or anything like that. But it's just kind of like he started this era, so to see him kind of go out on a winning note will be
the perfect ending.
Yeah. Side note: Steve Kerr is such a Steph merchant that he is going to retire when Steph retires.
He is. And I would be shocked if he doesn't retire the same year. Oh, Steph's retiring. Guys, I'm stepping down from the Warriors stuff. From these top 5, though, to answer my own question, as big of a Luka fan as I am, look, Jokic coming back, just trying to get another ring with lesser talent, less depth. That's going to be fun. Joel, same story. Can he finally get out the first round? But to me, it's Giannis. Giannis last year after the season, how that ended for them. You were still on the pod weekly, and I came out here and I just had this abnormal rant about Giannis, right? I just was going in on Giannis saying that season was a failure and everything. I want to see this dude come back. This roster is not necessarily stacked. They lost Malik Beasley. I want to see this team with the lackluster shooting that they have. I want to see him just come out and be the MVP next season. I think that might be my prediction here in a couple weeks. But go ahead one more time.
I'd also get like Joel Embiid. I wouldn't be mad if he got a ring just because Paul George is on his team.
Yes,
let me clarify that.
I don't want that to happen because Carmelo's my favorite player, and I think Paul George getting a ring might put him over Melo as far as all-time play. And plus, I don't want your favorite player to get one and before my favorite player gets one.
Oh, well, I got a lot of slack for Russ, so Russ might get one on the coattails of the Nuggets, but it won't be the same type of impact that PG gets on Philly.
But here is your quick look at the top 50. Of course, again, 10. You see they're sectioned by 10. View these guys in tiers of 5. As I want to reiterate as we close the show. Here is the positional top 10s. Of course, if you missed it, the last 5 weeks on this channel, I went through position by position, Bakari joined for the centers, but we went through and I ranked the top 10 players at every position. That's going to do it here for episode 203. Bakari, thank you for joining the show. Longer show today. If I remember, I'll have some timestamps in the description or the comment section of today's video. But let me know what you think in the comments. Who's too high, too low? Let me know. Bakari, any last thoughts before we get out of here, man? Thank you for joining the show.
This is a fun episode. Obviously, ranking is so hard, especially when you're doing just a general top list. So I know this is going to cause a lot of debate. So it's always fun to do lists like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this Thursday we have our record predictions in the NFL side of things, as that season is right around the corner. Amir is going to be joining the show, and then next week we're going to start deep diving into some of these teams in the Eastern and the Western conferences, really looking into what their season could look like this upcoming year. But that's enough yapping. Thank you for enjoying it if you made it to this point. I'll see you guys next week. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy. Get out of here.